Miraidon had an awesome 2023 with numerous top finishes and championships under its belt, and it became a fan favorite deck along the way. I personally played Miraidon at Toronto Regionals, and I know a number of you love the deck as well, and even bought that Miraidon League battle deck, and are now wondering, what does Miraidon look like in a post-rotation format? I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I did some digging. I've been doing some research. I've been doing an ongoing series on post-rotation deck previews. I've already done Charizard and Gardevoir. Go check out the channel for some of those. And today we are going to talk about Miraidon. Let's start with the million-dollar question. Did it survive rotation? Now, shout outs to Omnipoke for the chart, who went through a whole bunch of the Japanese tournament results, put together this chart based on how well each of the decks has done. And Miraidon is all the way over here on the fringes of not even being lumped into the other category. And right now, arguably, Miraidon for the last 6 months or so has been in this sort of top 5 chunk, and Miraidon has definitely seen a slip. Now, I wouldn't necessarily write off Miraidon forever ever. Miraidon has been a deck that has evolved numerous times in its lifetime, and there's no telling how it will evolve in the foreseeable future or when new cards come out. But at least based on super early results from Japan, it is not doing as well as it is in a pre-rotation format. Further evidence of how well Miraidon is or isn't doing at the moment, this is Pokekabook's tier list, and normally Miraidon is somewhere on this chart, and it's not even mentioned among the 9 decks here. So not a great sign to start off with. Again, fingers crossed that maybe we just haven't found the right combination of cards in the current format, or maybe there are new cards coming out that will make Miraidon stronger. We shall see. Factoring into why Miraidon is where it is right now is that it lost some really important cards. Flaffy is a huge loss for the deck. Dynamotor allowed you to accelerate a little bit of extra energy, and that really pushed Miraidon over the top around the summer of last year when people started moving away from the Regieleki builds, going with the Flaffy-based builds, and playing more aggressive. We also lost Path to the Peak, which sort of hurts Miraidon, but once you get set up with Miraidon, you don't really care about your abilities, and Path to the Peak was a great way of slowing down your opponents. And now you can't shut off your opponent's abilities like that anymore. Peony is a relatively recent card that appeared in Miraidon decks, and that helped you out aggro a whole bunch of other decks, being able to play super fast and get those generators right away. That card is gone as well. And Escape Rope, I know a lot of decks are hurt by the loss of Escape Rope, but Escape Rope going away from Miraidon does kind of suck here as well. So Miraidon, whether you were playing the super fast Miraidon or the slower, more control-based Miraidons, it kind of loses tools on both ends, which makes it a little bit unfortunate for Miraidon at this point in time. The new cards that Miraidon is getting don't cover the losses from rotation. However, these are some nice complementary pieces, such as Emergency Board, where it lowers retreat costs by 1. Probably not going to be enough to make Iron Hands an easy retreat. However, being able to retreat stuff like Miraidon, Raikou, and Raichu for free helps keep more energy on the board, which is very nice because energy conservation is going to be a really big part of the deck going forward. Prime Catcher is a new gusting option, which sort of works like Escape Rope, except you get the target. It's a little better. You can only have one of these in your deck. However, being able to gust a target of your choice is really nice, especially for this deck, which sometimes can have some awkward damage breaks depending on what your attackers are. And sometimes this can be great to get Iron Hands in the right spot to take that multi-prize KO. Maximum Belt is an intriguing option, helping you hit EX Pokemon with an extra 50 damage, and that can go a long way towards one-shotting basic EXs and possibly stage 1 or even stage 2 EXs as well, depending on how many Regielekis you have on the board if you're playing that particular build. But regardless, having that extra damage can really turn the tide of a match. Heavy Baton feels like it was made for Iron Hands. If your Pokemon has exactly 4 retreat, which Iron Hands does, when it gets knocked out, you get to move 3 of that energy to your Pokemon on the bench. Again, losing Flaffy is such a big loss for Miraidon, and Heavy Baton helps keep that energy in play to keep your other attackers powered up. New potential includes our cards that are already in the format that we may want to consider adding to the deck or adding back into the deck if they were there before, such as Regieleki V and V Max. And I know the Regieleki style of Miraidon deck fell out of favor last year, but we definitely have to reconsider it again as we have lost Flaffy and don't need room for that type of energy acceleration anymore. The extra damage bump from Transistor could be very valuable in this deck, especially if we're comboing that with the Maximum Belt, and with enough Regielekis on the board as well as Maximum Belt, we can have Miraidon or Raikou potentially one-shot a Charizard EX, which is at the very least intriguing and something we need to explore further. Energy Sticker is sort of a replacement for Flaffy. You get to flip a coin, and if heads, you get to attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. It is a coin flip. It's not going to work every time, but Flaffy was really good for attaching, 1 to 2 energy per game. If you're able to hit 1 or 2 of those in a game, that could be good enough more often than not. XP Share is a tech card that a number of Miraidon decks are already playing before rotation. When a Pokemon gets knocked out, any Pokemon with XP Share can take an energy off of that Pokemon while the knocked out Pokemon is on the way out. And energy conservation is going to be a massive deal for Miraidon, and XP Share helps keep that energy on the board so you can land attacks with your other attackers, whether it's a quick attack with Raikou or charging up enough energy on the board to get that massive one-shot with Raichu. Arven becomes more important in the new era of Miraidon because we're running more tools, and yeah, item-based search is always good for those electric generators, but now that we're running more tools like Maximum Belt, this becomes even more important. Speaking of tools, Town Store becomes a great way of grabbing that Maximum Belt and any other tools we are putting in our arsenal. Unfortunately, no path to the peak. Beach Court could be still another one that we incorporate into Miraidon decks, but Town Store is a great way of getting that Maximum Belt out of the deck. This first example is about as close to what I could find of a current Miraidon build. We've got 3 Miraidons, 2 Iron Hands, and then we've got the split of Raikous, Raichus. We do have the Squawkabill, all of the usual suspects here, with the one exception of Radiant Greninja, which is a new addition to the deck. Helps us discard energy, draw cards, and also getting energy in the discard pile becomes important because we are using Energy Sticker in this deck to try and reattach that energy. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. We do have the electric generator still here. This deck is opting to use the new Prime Catcher. We also still have Forest Seal Stone, which is a very nice card you can attach to Raikou or Raichu to grab a card of your choice from the deck as your V-Star power. Lots of XP shares here with 3, and no Bravery Charms whatsoever. That was a strategy that players were using before to try and make your basic attackers tankier, and this time we are going with XP shares to keep that energy on the board. We do have 1 emergency board for easier retreating. No sort of beach courts here to make retreating easier for both sides. At the very least, emergency board is a one-sided retreat option, which could be a benefit to you and not give your opponent that extra retreat. And then, yeah, 3 Arven, 2 Iono, 1 Research. Kind of a little light on draw options here, to be honest, but it's not a bad take on the deck. And yeah, the big takeaways here are the energy stickers, the Prime Catcher, and a heavy count of XP share. This second example could be particularly important for those who bought the Miraidon League Battle deck and you're like, what the heck do I do with these Regielekis? You might want to dust them off to build this version of the deck. We have a 3/3 line of Regieleki, VMAX, and if you've got all 3 Regielekis in play, your Miraidon's Photon Blaster is going to do 310 damage. And if you get the Maximum Belt equipped, you are one-shotting Charizard or any other multi-prize Pokemon in the game. You're doing more than the maximum limit. I think the only thing you don't hit is you don't finish off is like Blastoise EX, which actually you're going to hit that for weakness anyway. So yeah, you can one-shot anything in the game if you can set up your board with all 3 Regielekis. Regardless, if you set up 2, you're still doing 280 damage and taking those one-shots, which could be enough to make this deck a little more viable. Again, we do see Radiant Greninja pop up again, which normally isn't in these decks, but we are using this to discard energy and draw. However, weirdly, we don't have any energy stickers in this deck. We are relying on attaching from hand, as well as the 4 electric generators. IMO, I think Miraidon has to have the stickers going forward, but most of these lists actually don't, which I find a little odd. Any other things worth noting here? Lost Vacuum here can take out any sort of... Stadium's not so much these days, but definitely any sort of like defensive charm, like a Bravery Charm or an Ancient Booster Capsule to get any sort of defensive tools out of the way. Maximum Belt to hit that extra damage. Couple of XP shares here as well. And this one's got heavy draw support here with 4 Professor's Research, 2 Iono, and only a couple of Arven here, as well as 16 basic energy and no double turbos. And in case you're wondering about this Thundurus, it has the ability of adverse weather, where as long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, you prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. It's, I guess its attack is not necessarily bad either. As a single prize attacker, it's doing 140 damage, and you can take out some basics that way. I guess with the Regielekis in play, this could actually KO some basic EXs and stuff like that, but its ability doesn't seem that great. Like, just play Manaphy at that point. But as an attacker, maybe it's not so bad in this. I love this example, as wacky as this build is. We do have Miraidon here setting up. We do have a Ditto here to try and get the attacker of choice in the active. And the key to this deck, you're looking at this probably, what the heck is Magnezone and Zeraora doing in here? Well, the trick here, the gimmick to this particular build is Salvatore, where it lets you search your deck for a Pokemon, accept any Pokemon with abilities that evolve from one of your Pokemon in play, and put that on your Pokemon to evolve it, then shuffle your deck. And what this allows you to do is turn 1 going second, you can go straight into Magnezone V-Star and use its V-Star power, Electro Star, you have to power this up of course, where you get to do 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and all of a sudden, turn 1, you snipe out 2 Charmanders, and you have a Pokemon with 270 HP. Could be absolutely nuts, and Lost Box is going to hate this as well. Any sort of decks running evolution Pokemon, being able to snipe them out on the first turn is awesome. And then Zeraora VMAX is very beefy. Its attack reactive pulse for 2 lightning energy. You does 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability. And there are a number of decks that load their benches with Pokemon with abilities, and you could take massive one-shots on the first turn with Zeraora while also having a 320 HP behemoth on the active. And I love the idea of this one. I don't know how consistent this is going to be, but I definitely want to kick the tires on this because this one looks a lot of fun. This fourth example is a pretty vanilla build with the usual assortment of attackers and support Pokemon. The big difference here is the inclusion of the Heavy Baton, where when we power up Iron Hands, we can move that energy to our bench Pokemon. I'm surprised more of these builds aren't using Heavy Baton. I feel like the energy sticker and the Heavy Baton are a must in Miraidon, but hey, I haven't had a chance to test these yet, so I could be wrong, but Heavy Baton feels like a really good card to have in Miraidon, so you can move that energy off of the Iron Hands for future plays. Also worth noting here, 17 lightning energy plus the double turbo. We are leaning very heavily into electric generators hitting. The last build is another wacky example. Our usual spread of attackers and support Pokemon here. However, we do have a couple of weird additions here. We've already talked about the Radiant Greninja, but what about the Dunsparce? This is going to be a new card from Temporal Forces, where it has the ability Dashing Draw. Once during your turn, you may draw 3 cards, and if you do, you shuffle this Pokemon and all attached cards into your deck. Very cool ability, very cool way of drawing cards. It also shortens your bench, which could be good, could be bad. It's kind of counterintuitive with Raikou attack, but the trade-off here is that if you combo the Dunsparce or either Greninja with Cryptomaniac's Deciphering, where it lets you search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle your deck, put them on the top of your deck, you can then combo that with Greninja or the Dunsparce to draw whatever pieces you need. So it sort of works like a Peony. If you're stacking the generators on the top and then you're drawing them, it's kind of a neat way of recreating that effect of Peony, getting the pieces that you need. Definitely requires more work, but I love the concept of this one, and I'm very curious to see how it works. And they have 4 copies of Cryptomaniac's Deciphering, so they're really leaning into this idea of getting the pieces they need early. And the last piece here, the Iron Bundle, very weird inclusion, but I don't necessarily hate it. It has the ability Iron Blower or Hyper Blower, where once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. And then if you do, you discard this Pokemon and all attached cards. So it's kind of like a half escape rope that your opponent has to do, and you get to move it off of your board, and just another way of disrupting your opponent and possibly putting them in a more disadvantageous situation for them. Miraidon might be in a weird spot right now, but I would not count it out. As you've seen from these examples, there are some really cool ideas that can be had with the new decks, some really powerful combo options that could be explored. In particular, I'm so excited about that Magnezone Zeraora build, and I want to see more wacky stuff like that that could put Miraidon back into the forefront. And maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just a matter of putting in more stickers and heavy batons to keep that energy in play, and that could be enough to bring Miraidon back to prominence. But what say you? Are you excited for post-rotation times? Do you think Miraidon has what it takes to get back to its former glory? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things. Oh, geez, wrong button. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at @InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at @InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website inthirdperson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.